John M. Chu's Wicked and Ridley Scott's Gladiator II battle it out in the box office this past weekend. Alec Baldwin's Rust opened at the Camera Image Film Festival, the first trailer for the live-action How to Train Your Dragons release, this and so much more on this episode of Beyond the Screen. My name is Ryan Gum. I'm a multimedia professional with a degree in broadcasting and film, and I'll be your host today. I am joined by fellow creator and filmmaker Jacob Holtzclaw. Jake, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am also a multimedia professional. I went to school for broadcasting and film, and I've somehow weaseled my way into a marketing focused career. So I'm learning all kinds of new stuff every day.
And as we continue to go on, marketing and filmmaking, they kind of become the same thing. Media is just one conglomerate after the other. So we welcome Jake.
Oh yeah, we become a powerhouse, dude. We can do anything we want.
Yes, sir. And with that being said, and now that you know who we are, let's get started. Segment 1, box office numbers. Now, if you keep up with anything box office this last couple of weeks, you'll know, one, that Red One, starring Dwayne Johnson and Chris Evans, did not do so well last week. Heading into this week, we knew it was going to be a tough battle against what was a matchup between Wicked and Gladiator II. That was an interesting combination. As things happened, Red One did fall to 3. Jake, can you tell the people who won between Wicked and Gladiator II?
I mean, I don't think there's any question. It's Wicked. Wicked won by almost, or actually more than double, with 112 million. 508,000 versus 55 million. So it's not even close, man. It's a blowout pretty much.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that Gladiator 2 last week opened up internationally to the best opening that Paramount for an R-rated film with them had ever had internationally, and then a Ridley Scott film in opening in international theaters. So I had a lot more expectation for Gladiator 2. In fact, I would have thought that Gladiator 2 would have beaten Wicked, and I know that might be a little naive with Wicked tailoring to a much larger audience. They're not as niche. But with the opening overseas, I really would have thought Gladiator 2 would have done a lot better. In fact, Gladiator 2 hit below its projected number at 60 million, at 55.5, as you had said. That's just weird for a movie that seemed to be on the right track in terms of marketing and in terms of just finances. It's just an odd fall.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those movies that I honestly think will be a slow burn. This is going to be a movie that's going to show up on like TNT and Stars and in 10 years from now. You know, this is going to be in a living room with your dad sleeping in his recliner and it's just playing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Wicked, will it be able to become the Wizard of Oz that it kind of is the homage to? Maybe. There is always going to be a part 2 for this too, so it might.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this too, in terms of how well this movie opened this past weekend, a 3-day opening weekend. Now, when we cover, for those of you who might find this, who might not know how box office numbers work, you just say, hey, that's what a movie made. Usually movies are covered by days that they are, like, people are most likely going to go see them. So while there are weekly coverages, more often than not, you'll hear weekend box office, which covers a 3-day stretch from Friday through Sunday. So that's usually what, on this segment, we'll talk about is kind of the big weekend numbers, because that's usually a great indicator on how movies will perform week in and week out, or maybe even over the course of a year. So in this instance, Wicked, this was the third best opening third best opening this year and the best opening for a musical adaptation ever. This movie, I mean, insane. The third best opening this year behind, I know Inside Out 2 was 1. I'm not sure who's number 2, but that's great company to keep, especially in this year when people are kind of having a resurgence in films. A lot of talk going on about more original type of content. So this was just an interesting weekend for Wicked and Gladiator 2. Wicked, as Jake had just mentioned, is the first in a series. They did not market it as the first in a series. They just called it Wicked. And as John M. Chu, the director, had once said in a recent interview with Screen Rant, that's up to not him. He had no inclination and no kind of backdrop as to how this would get marketed. He just made the film. The film, as it stands, is nearly 3 hours, yet only covers the first act of the musical. So there's a lot more story to tell here, which I think does a lot for its own longevity. I do agree. I think what will be an interesting comment, and here's another thing moving forward. Moana 2 comes out on Wednesday, which I know everything I just said about a Friday to Sunday, that's usually the main barometer. Sometimes these kid movies will release midweek and they draw a lot of attention. Will Moana take away from the same audience that might go see Wicked? Because the thing is, I don't think a Moana 2 will affect a Gladiator 2 as much as it will affect a Wicked.
No, no, I think if I'm thinking as a family, if I got my wife and two kids, I'm gonna let the kids and the wife go watch a double feature with Moana and Wicked, and I'm gonna go chill out in the Gladiator 2. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's 3 tickets towards these others, and only 1 ticket to Gladiator 2. I don't think it's gonna lose as much of its audience, but Wicked and Moana 2 are definitely gonna have to battle it out.
Yeah, I think by the end of this, come Oscar season, because we're 100 days from the Oscars, and everyone's talking about the award-winning films. I think between now and that set date, we will see Wicked kind of lose its steam. It will continue to rake in millions of dollars, I think, like hundreds of millions. However, I would assume Gladiator it's 60, 50, 60 million a week. It probably will hold that for a long time. I doubt it will go below 30, at least not until closer, like a lot closer to March. Looking at the rest of the box office, as we had said before, it's Wicked, Gladiator 2, and Red 1, 1 through 3. Red 1 falls from the number one spot. It made another 13 million from this past week, rounding out its total gross of 52, almost 53 million. Reminder, that movie cost 250 million to make, and you need to make well more than that to break even. So I don't want to stamp anything in terms of labeling, but I think it's okay to throw the flop meter as it's level 10 right now for Dwayne Johnson's movie.
Yeah, I mean, even the scores it's pulling in are not good.
No.
It really is. I don't know how to describe it, man. I don't want to, like you said, don't want to label it, but when you drop 58% in the gross on your second week and your and your max is 52, it, that's rough. That's rough. And
Yeah.
who's to blame? You know, like who can you blame? Is it just another Jumanji feeling rock movie? You know, like I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even Jumanji did better than this, I think.
Oh yeah.
So, what happened?
I think at the end of the day, it suffers because it feels like just another Christmas trope. Like I saw that, like the thing with Jumanji is that like I grew up watching Robin Williams, so like when I saw that initial title, I see like yes, it's J.K. Simmons, it's Chris Evans, it's The Rock, whatever. But with Jumanji, I felt that cast was a little bit more stacked. I felt like there was a lot more to explore in that realm with Jumanji, because Jumanji as a game is interesting because it transcended the board, right? Whereas Red One, it just feels like another stereotypical Christmas movie, which usually those do well. There's a large audience for those. I just think, as we had talked about before, with Moana potentially taking away from Wicked, I think Wicked and Red One had a very similar demographic that they aimed for, on top of having a terrible opening weekend. So I just, that's kind of my 2 cents on Red One. I feel bad for it because if you look at the critic versus the audience scores, critics hate it, audiences love it. People who have seen it say it's fun. Those who have a little bit more of a film background and look for something deeper than just a fun, entertaining movie, they don't really seem to enjoy it. But that's neither here nor there. Moving on down the line, 3 of the top 4 in this week's box office numbers are all new to the list. It's all their first weeks. Number 4, I have not heard of this one. I don't know. Pastor Spy Assassin from Angel Studios made $5 million this past weekend, which I could not tell you anything about that film. I love the name though. Definitely earns name of the week. Going
Yeah.
down the line, we know nothing about this movie, so we're just going to move on. Venom: The Last Dance rounds out the top 5. It earned just under 4 million this week. While that is a big drop from last week at 47%, it is total gross is at 133, almost 134. It's doing fine. The Best Christmas Pageant ever from Lionsgate made 3 million this weekend, bringing its total up to 25. Heretic, another 2, bringing its total up to 24. The Wild Robot continues its long stretch in the top 10 of the box office week in and week out. The Wild Robot earns 2 million. Grand total of 140, almost 141. Great pull from Universal Studios. Conclave at 9, and finally to round out the top 10, a little bit of that Halloween residuals sticking around. Smile 2 makes just over 1 million to bring its total up to 67 for Paramount. What a top 10.
Yeah, no, it's definitely Smile 2's holding on in their 6th week. Wild Robot's on the ninth week too, and it's still going. It's another one of those feel good family movies
Hmm.
that I think kind of got overlooked, but not. I mean, judging by the number, not really. Um, but Venom's still top five, even though it's like I'm a little Venomed out. But that's just me. I'm not big on the Marvel movies anymore. I'm also marveled out, and so this I don't know, man. It's they need to do something. Something needs to change. It just feels like the same copy and paste
Yeah.
uh movie nowadays.
Hmm. Something interesting, a little tidbit about The Wild Robot. It's directed by the same guy who did Lilo and Stitch, The Croods, and more. So this is a guy who he's had. His name is Chris Sanders. He's had a long stretch of really successful animated movies, and it's really cool to see this continue to last. Especially, this isn't a guy who comes out with a movie every year. If you kind of look at his filmography, things kind of bounce around for him. So it's good to see
Yeah.
that like this is a true traditional creator. And as you said, The Wild Robot a little bit more original. So it's fun to see these original titles continuing to carry on the legacy a little bit as people, today the normal stereotype is that like everything's a sequel. If you
Yeah.
look deep enough, we didn't go beyond the top 10, but Honora, which is I'm pretty sure it's a Focus Features or a Neon, it's still in the top 15. It's 12. It was Neon. That film's made 12 million, and that one's on a ton of like Feinsberg Film of the Year, like Oscar winning type of films, and it's a completely original story. So I'm excited to see these new stories outside of these sequels, even though this was the year of the sequel,
Mhm.
continue to do well in the box office.
Well, what was Red One based off of? We can't just talk about these movies that are new stories and then crap on Red One. What happened with Red One? Like, if it's original story, what's the difference?
I think
It's obviously not performing, even though it's a decent kids movie. But then again, it's like, what's going on? If it's an original story and it's just a feel good movie, is it just the way it's told? Maybe that's to blame.
Yeah. Again, I think it's while it is original, and I'm using physically as if you guys can see me. I'm putting in air quotes there. I think the idea of originality comes from like, or I guess knock. I should say the knocking of originality points against Red One comes from the fact that it is just another Christmas movie, so people feel like they've seen it
Mhm.
already. I don't know if that makes any sense. It is an original story, as in like no one's told that one, but how many Christmas type action movies do we have? Especially, or in that same breath, the Rock type movies do we have? So with those two things going against it, it feels like we've seen it already. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about major talking points from this last week in film. We're going to talk about Alex Baldwin and Rust. We're going to talk about the new How to Train Your Dragon and more. Welcome back to Beyond the Screen. We're moving on to segment 2, our major talking points from this past week in film. Alec Baldwin's Western Rust debuts at Poland's Camera Image Film Festival after 3 years following the tragic accident that took the life of director of photography Helena Hutchins. Director Joel Souza and new cinematographer Bianca Klein were in attendance. Baldwin was not, as he was purposefully not invited by the festival to avoid a media frenzy. The event was designated as in like an honoring type of ceremony for Hutchins and her life and also that she contributed. A lot of people knew her who were in attendance. This type of festival was filled in the audience with production professionals and just people who were generally around Hutchins and kind of what she did. Not everyone knew her, but they all seemed to understand where she come from and understand kind of what she was about if they didn't know her. So it was really an emotional night. Festival officials asked the crowd for a moment of silence, or a minute of silence, I should say, in honor before anything really kicked off. Documentary filmmaker and Hutchins' close friend Rachel Mason gave a heartfelt speech to introduce the film. She would go on to call director Souza and DP Klein heroes for returning to the film. Mason is actually working on, and has been for the past 3 years since her friend's death, has been working on a documentary kind of recounting the life and kind of the impact she had, that is Hutchins, and covering her amazing work. Hutchins' mother, Olga, however, was not in attendance. Notably, she was invited, and there's a hope. So she's from Ukraine, which was another concern going on with what's happening overseas, just politically in the war with Russia right now. However, her lawyer and her had a joint statement condemning Alec Baldwin in the release of the film, saying that Baldwin in particular continues to increase my pain and, quote, seeks to unjustly profit from his killing of my daughter. Which is just a tough situation all around. It's always been, but it's just sad environment in Poland.
Yeah, it's truly awful. I mean, there's so many things that could have been done to prevent this this happening. I mean, it's so many people didn't do their due diligence. You know, there are reasons that there are people on set to do the one thing is to check the gun. That is their job. You know, and prop masters to provide the right ammunition and the gun. And there's so many places that this set failed. It's truly sad. It should have never happened, and it will be forever a lesson for the film industry.
Yeah.
Um,
The question
it,
is like,
it's
do you even though this was an event kind of reconfigured and dedicated to honoring Hutchins' life, the question will always be, should you have ever shown the film?
right, and the only people who, I mean, the only person that would really be able to answer that question is no longer with us. So you can only really trust the mom and her closest friends. But I mean, life goes on.
Yeah.
It really, I mean, in Hollywood, it's whatever makes money, unfortunately. So if they think that this movie can actually profit off of her death, that's probably what's going to happen, unfortunately. But
Hmm.
like I'm more on the side of the mother who didn't want this movie to come out, even though I can understand both sides. But I'm a move on type of fella. So if something like this happened, I would probably not have continued.
Right. And I think an interesting note here, and it's easy to kind of make a decision without having kind of some further context. And
Right.
with that being said, saying that it shouldn't have been like even just made, I think is very valid regardless of any context because of the tragedy that unfolded and because like sometimes life is more important than a project. And that is tough to hear, especially from people like me and you in our industry, right? Like we want to think that our art and kind of our creative vision is the end all be all, but sometimes it's just not. So I completely understand that mindset, and you're not, no one's wrong, especially Hutchins' mother, Olga. She's nowhere near incorrect. Um, I do think that an interesting little tidbit is Helena herself was a past attendant or attendee of the Kamer Image Festival, who in a private conversation, now this was reported by the Hollywood Reporter, so there's no direct report on who she was talking to. But in a private conversation told one of her coworkers that she hoped to one day have her film screened at this very festival. I think at that point, like that kind of, in my mind, justifies it a little more. Like if you're going to honor it anywhere, honor it at the place that she was like, she one day wanted to see her film screened at. That doesn't, obviously that kind of can go right in the face of other things we've discussed about the accident and should they or should they have not have. But I think in my mind, I can rest a little easier. One, knowing that her friends, because it's not like these people just worked together and they didn't know each other. Souza and Klein, the director and the DP who took over for Hutchins when when the accident happened, they were friends of hers. They knew her. And so there was kind of like, from what I was reading, there was a desire to continue and make it for her because she was so invested and she was so impactful in what she did. So with the kind of those two things for me, it's like I feel rest assured that it was done properly, especially not inviting Alec Baldwin because that's his film. Like he is a producer of it. Like he was kind of like driving like the big name attached to it. So leaving him out, knowing that if he shows up, you're going to get a media frenzy and probably get more publicity than ever before. If he was there, they still choose and say no, stay away. We don't want that kind of attention. We just want to honor the creative vision of this wonderful human being who was taken too early. And that's why I personally am like, I'm okay with it because of everything I've read, they seem to have done it right. Now I say that, and there will probably be a report of something one way or another, and might end up making me sound terrible right now. But in this moment, that's kind of how I feel about it. Director Souza he was injured in the accidental shooting. For those who don't know and don't remember, they were getting ready for another scene, and they were prepping the shot, and as they were kind of all there together looking at the camera, making sure everything was ready, Baldwin was practicing with his revolver that he had that should have been filled with blanks. And as he did his it was like a whip, I think I don't remember exactly what he was trying to do, but in the scene, he was supposed to whip it out really quick and fire. And when he did, there was somehow, this is the mystery too, is there was a live round in the chamber, and that is how the tragedy unfolded. And to this day, following extensive investigations and prosecutions, no one knows. Just a tough environment.
And I mean, on this set alone, this was not the first accidental discharge of a firearm, blank or not. They had, I think, 2 occasions where rifles went off by accident on this set, and there has been several different, I believe, lawsuits filed or at least complaints that this was not a safe set to be working on to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And that just goes back to what I said, is like there's so many things that went wrong leading up to it. It's truly it's tragic. It's so tragic that so many people failed to do their job that they were hired to do. And that's what I think everybody should take home on this topic, is just we are put on this earth to do something, and if my job is to make sure that this gun does not have a live round in it, because something like this can happen, that's what I'm gonna do, man. But I don't know how so many people failed at that.
At the end of the day, I think that this is kind of what everyone can agree on, and it was very controversial in this entire process, and even the release. Hutchins should be here today. End all be all.
Very much so. Yes. Right.
I think that's a good note to move on. Let's get on a little bit of a happier note here. Sorry, thank you for sticking around this much. That was kind of a depressing little tidbit there for the last I'd say about 7-8 minutes. Moving on, How to Train Your Dragon teaser released this past week. We've seen first looks as Mason Thames as Hiccup, Nico Parker as Astrid, and Gerard Butler as Stoic, and so many more. For me, it looked like a shot for shot. I know that there are certain details that are different between animated original and now. Dean Dubois, who is one of the co-directors of the original, is back he's the main director of this one, so it captures that same feel for me. Jake, what do you think?
Dude, I can't wait. I absolutely cannot wait. It's like reliving my childhood, I think, regardless of all the politics and the opinions on the cast, I can't wait for this story to be told how they want to tell it. I believe it's the same director or along the same people making this version as they did. I don't know how long ago it was.
2010.
10 years? Has it been 10 years?
2010, 14.
14?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems a long time ago, but I remember watching this movie, and the second one and the third one, and each, one after the other. It was just, even, a lot of people say this about sequels. They're never going to be as good as the first. And I mean, that kind of goes hand in hand with this film, but they're still so good. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is about them, the world building, how big they seem, and it's all just animation. So I can't wait to see the live action version.
Yeah, and something we had talked about away from the mics and just discussing this movie, the need for live action adaptations. Now, I will be the first to tell you, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer. I don't mean to be the guy that is so contradictory. And I've seen this opinion kind of going around. It's back and forth. I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think, in my mind, this was the perfect movie. I've told you the story, and I'm going to tell you people at home. I watched this movie when I was 9 years old. I grew up in this little town in Appalachia, out in just the middle of nowhere. And we had in the adjoining town, because we didn't have a movie theater in my hometown. So in the next town over, there was this one like presentation theater where you walk in, there's just one showroom, and that's where we watched it. And I made the genius decision at 9 to sit in the very front, and I watched How to Train Your Dragon, and I just exactly what Jake said, the world building and everything was perfect. And so How to Train Your Dragon, the original, kind of it holds this little piece of my heart. And to see it like live action, while that's a cool concept, it will never quite be what the original was, especially when you've told it so perfectly. I just don't know if it's needed. And another thing we talked about, and I want you to really delve into this, Jake, the idea that this will set a precedent for live action adaptations of films that do not need them.
Yeah, I definitely foresee How to Train Your Dragon live action to be a huge success, and it scares me because I'm usually not a big live action fan. I know how Lion King turned out, and I somewhat enjoyed Jungle Book, but they aren't needed. I agree, and I don't, you know, I think if this succeeds, it's going to set a precedent, and all the other studios, Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, I mean, they're all going to try to hop on this bandwagon and see if they can't make the same thing, and we're going to end up seeing like Toy Story live action
Oh God.
and just films that don't that don't need it, man. It's um now I can get it from a business standpoint. How to Train Your Dragon live action, it's almost a shot for shot movie of the animation, and it's going to be a success. So theoretically, they they made money off of a story they already told. It's easy at that point. Little went in besides, I mean, it's live action. A lot more work definitely went in into that production. Other than not to say the animators didn't do a lot, but the story's already told. You know,
Yeah.
so it's super easy just to follow the same blueprint that worked the first time. So there's
Yeah.
nothing new, but something about this film, it's different than the hype around Lion King or the hype around Jungle Book. And it might be riding the coattails of the first How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
But
And
that's
you
pretty much what I got to say. I really just hope it doesn't mean we're in the era of live action.
No, and I completely agree. I will go out on a limb and say this will probably make 500 million or more. I just think that with the success of the original, and just with, I know I'm going to be adding to this precedent. I'm going to be making the problem worse because I want to see what this will look like. I'm very curious. It's a great story. So it's one of those things where it's like, you're not going to lose if you go see it. But that's where the danger comes in, because let's put it this way. DreamWorks, and this is a Universal production, but it's a DreamWorks story, so they're kind of, they're tag teaming it right now. If they outperform Disney, because you talk about the Disney remakes, none of them have been home runs. You go back and you look, the Jungle Book, while I thought it was a good quality remake, wasn't necessarily the big hit they thought. The Aladdin remake wasn't great. The Jungle Book, or not the Jungle Book, sorry, the Lion King remake wasn't great, and so on and so on and so on. If DreamWorks, who is one of the main competitors in the animation industry to Disney, in their first their first endeavor into the live action remakes, absolutely knocks it out of the park, Disney will not stand for that. They will see that as a direct competition to their assets, which we see even from day to day. If you dare use a Mickey Mouse where you shouldn't, you will get contacted by Disney lawyers. Do you think that company will let DreamWorks walk all over them in an avenue that they've been trying to monopolize for the last almost decade? The answer is no. So I think that's going to be interesting to see how things shake out from a precedent standpoint. I think it's going to happen. I think we're already kind of seeing it a little bit as you accurately depicted. I just think it's going to get so much worse.
Yeah, and we're kind of already seeing it even with trailers that are just coming out too. There seems to be no stop. There's no stop to the live action train.
No, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing remains to be seen. I'm going to be cautiously pessimistic, I will say, about that. The film releases June 13th of next year. Once again, is a Universal and DreamWorks production. That has been your major news from this past week. Coming up next, we hop into the things you should know about and what we're watching next week. Coming up right after this. Hello and welcome back. Thank you so much for sticking with us this long. You've made it to segment 3, our third and final segment of the day. We're going to tell you about things you should know before you leave in quick succession and what we're watching this week. If you've made it this far and you like what you're listening to, leave a review, leave a comment, give it a like, share it, do all the fun things that you know we like for you to do. If you've had the time of day, if not, you just kind of want to listen and leave, wave you on. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you have the inclination to maybe give it to your mom or your friend. We would really appreciate that. Hopping in, the very first
Definitely
thing,
your mom. Definitely your mom.
your
man.
mom will love film news. Maybe we'll talk some drama.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
Hopping into film news. Very first thing on the dock. If you listened to our last segment, and I really hope you did, why are you here if you didn't? We talked about live action and we talked about the remakes. Lilo and Stitch, the live action remake, gets its first teaser trailer. We see Stitch in almost a shot for shot remake, except for one key detail, but I'll save that for after this. In a shot for shot remake of his scene in the original where he's in Lilo's room and he's walking around her. She has her set, like toys set up almost like a cityscape in her room. I think it's, if I remember correctly, it's a recreation of the town they live in. You see Stitch kind of going through, acting like a Godzilla-type monster, knocking things over, screaming, and just doing whatever. One of the more legendary scenes from the original. That scene is recreated in the teaser, except it's on a beach with sand castles, which might not seem like such a big deal until you realize that if that is something they're going to change, what else will they change? That's kind of my takeaway from the initial teaser. Jake, what you think?
Man, I just bashed live action for a good while, and I'm gonna say it again. I'm super excited to see this one too. I don't know what it is. I'm 2 for 2 on the live action remakes. I watched 30 seconds of that Lilo and Stitch, and I was already thinking back to how much my mom and I loved to watch Lilo and Stitch growing up. So they're playing on the nostalgia for me. It's gonna be. I think it's gonna be good. I won't know till I see a much longer trailer just to see how much they might change. But to see Stitch destroy all those sandcastles really was. It took me back. Now, something that I did notice, they kind of stuck to how he was drawn with this live action.
Yeah.
I didn't have really a lot of quarrels with how he looked. You know, we had that whole Sonic debacle back when that live action came out, and so much so that it actually got changed. I don't think that's going to happen here with Stitch. I think he's close enough that people are going to still really like him the way he started out.
Yeah, no, and I think that's kind of where like my interest level peaked was when I saw the teaser, and they had come out with some images before, and he looked overall the same, but you can never really like tell until you've seen it happening in like an actual video form. Watching him go, it's the thing is, if you know the scene I'm talking about from the original, the only difference is that it's on the beach. The movements and everything, and even the vocals are the exact same. So that's exciting, and he looks very similar. I just have a little bit of a worry once again. Like I will probably once again perpetuate the issue. I'm going to be in seats. I really want to see this movie because I'm interested to see where they take it. I don't know if I trust it. I don't know. I get a weird feeling about it. I think he looks, and this is the thing. Last comment on Stitch. He's adorable. I think he's the cutest thing I've ever seen. I've seen today anyway.
They captured it.
They
Yeah.
did. They
They
did.
captured what Stitch is all about. And then also going back to segment 2, this is a Disney film. So is this their first success that will kind of butt up against How to Train Your Dragon? This could be the live action battle we were talking about.
Conversations
Few
to be
minutes ago.
had.
Yeah.
Is this going to be? Are they going to try to manufacture? If Stitch comes out in like the summer around the same time, are they going to manufacture a Barbenheimer and try to be like How to Train Your Stitch or something? I hope not.
I'd be there. I'd be there though.
Same, but I just hate the manufactured hype, dude. It was so organic with Barbenheimer. Let it die, okay? Like we talked about Gladiator II and Wicked. Like I saw glicked. I saw the term glicked earlier, and it made me mad. So stop with this. Stop with this manufactured crap. Like just let the organic stuff happen and have fun with it. And then when it's over, let it go. It's over. Anyway, little tangent.
The forcing of memes is too much. Let meme culture do its thing, and if you are deemed worthy of the hype, you will get the hype.
Deemed worthy. Moving on, the final Conjuring film has wrapped, and it will release next year in the fall. If I remember, it's in September. I I know there's a lot of films in this franchise. The first two are fantastic. I did not watch The Devil Made Me Do It. Um, I don't know how to feel about a fourth Conjuring. I know there's like 8 or 9. I think there are 9 in the franchise with Annabelle the Nun, and if you count The Curse of La Llorona. Um, what's interesting about these films that I was looking up kind of their audience versus critic score, and especially with these spin-offs, because personally, I didn't really think Annabelle or the Nun, like Annabelle was fine as it's one, but the Nun and I'm gonna keep with Annabelle have like 2 or 3 movies each, and they were both just villains in one of the Conjuring films. I didn't necessarily think they needed that much in terms of like added fluff story. Annabelle, I understand because there's a lot more to the kind of the mythos of the real doll. However, I didn't think the Nun needed a sequel. If you look up their audience scores, they go up. As those series continues, specifically the spin-off series, they continue to improve and audiences love them more and more. So I would be, with that in mind and that trend with a James Wan series, I will be interested to see how a fourth and final installment of the Conjuring franchise, see how that performs, not just in a box office sense, because we could talk money all day. I'd be interested to see how not so much critics, but audiences enjoy it.
And I don't really have a lot of room. I'm not a horror kind of guy, but for some reason I did see The Nun, and
For
I don't know
some
what I was doing
reason.
or who I was with. It was okay. I don't care for the horror movies, so I'll leave it up to Ryan to guide you all through that one.
My fellow horror fans, I'm an avid reader of Bloody Disgusting. If you guys understand what I'm talking about, that is like the horror film go to. Like my personal film news source is Screen Rant. If I want to know anything about a horror movie, I'm going to Bloody Disgusting. So we'll talk about horror on here, and Jake, I promise you'll start getting in the know. But tidbit, just a little bit about horror today. The Conjuring wrapped, going to be in theaters next year in the fall. Moving on, Guillermo del Toro confirms his Frankenstein adaptation with Netflix will in fact be in a theatrical release, which is a big deal because a lot of big name movies, including one we're going to talk about here in a minute, have had trouble getting to theatrical and getting people in a theater, actual cinema, i.e. Roadhouse with Jake Gyllenhaal, the director of that, had a fit. If I remember correctly, he boycotted his own premiere because he was so mad that it wasn't getting a theatrical release from Amazon. And then Glass Onion, especially recently, why am I blanking on Daniel Craig's name? Daniel Craig in particular was really fighting for Glass Onion to be a theatrical release. If you remember, the first one was not a Netflix movie. Netflix bought the rights and is working with Ryan Johnson to produce these. The sequel obviously did not get a theatrical release, and apparently Daniel Craig was very unhappy about that. And we'll see about the third one. That's a battle he's continuing to fight. What do you think about these streamers kind of jerry-rigging their own releases? Yes, it's their movie. They technically own the rights, but you have a lot of these big names, these directors and these actors who are willing to be in these production houses' movies, but they're fighting. They have to tooth and nail to get it into theaters.
I think it boils down to money. They think they can corner the market and have people buy the Prime subscription or the Netflix subscription, and it's sad that that's the world we live in nowadays. And I don't blame the actors or the directors who want it to be in theaters, because that's what they've known, and I think that's what the audiences know, and that's what they prefer. Everybody's got this bad taste in their mouth that like, oh, it's a Netflix movie, you know. It's like
Yeah.
a common thing that people kind of say negatively. So is it a good business plan? Probably not until people get used to these streaming services shooting their movies.
Yeah.
But time will tell. Time will tell.
I think streamers are reluctant to kind of release their movies outside of their own platforms because of the last 4 years, going on 5 years with pandemic, post-pandemic, people are wanting to stay home. That has kind of been curved a little bit. This has been like we talked about earlier, this has been a big year for film. A lot of people are going out to see movies again. In particular, like movies like Conclave, where that has it's done really well in movies, and it's tailored to an adult audience. Not quite the Gladiator II. It's a very smart, not really action or thriller based. It's just a really smart, really intense thriller with Ray Fiennes and so on and so forth. And for movies like that to be successful, I think shows kind of the tides are switching back to people wanting to go out and to experience film. I think back to earlier this year with Longlegs and the hype that was able to produce, and it did really well in the box office. So I can see why now there's starting to be more of a fight from these people who long-standing have had their movies released and they want that feeling again, and I'm happy to see it come back. If I remember correctly, I've looked it up, the director of Roadhouse, his name is Doug Liman. He actually said something about selling toasters. He made a comment about, like, I don't care about selling toasters, but that's why they did it. In terms of Amazon, why they released it is because they, quote, will, and I say this loosely because I don't remember the exact quote, but it's, I don't like, they just want to sell more toasters, so they don't want to release it to theaters because they want more people on the app, which I get. I think that works for them. I don't know how long that will last.
No, that's going to be short-lived. Everybody's going to move on. They're going to cancel their subscription or XYZ. It's not going to stick. I think in this day and age, and what I'm seeing in social media and our jobs in general, is in this world of screens, people are lacking the personal touch. I'm seeing it in YouTube, I'm seeing it in vlogs. Everybody wants to feel like they're there, and that's just like a 30-second reel or a 10-minute video on YouTube. You're not seeing these professionally done videos anymore. You're seeing this guy walk out there, maybe a GoPro, probably just his phone, and you're just getting held there like a selfie stick, and you're just seeing what he's doing out in the middle of nowhere. He's working on something. This is what people want. They want to feel like they're actually in that shop or out in the desert helping somebody get unstuck. And I think it's all in that same pot. Is I want to be in a theater. It's been, since the pandemic, I've been on my phone. I've been watching streaming services. I think people strive and they want that interaction, the human interaction, the physical interaction, rather than sitting at home watching a TV you always watch.
Yeah, it feels, when you're in the theater, it feels bigger than life. When I watch films, even at home, I put myself within the world I'm watching. That's my favorite part about movies, is the world building. I love, even if it's somewhere super familiar, just being in that environment. The theater does that like no one else. It's just, there is no comparison. And we're gonna move on here, but this is in the exact same boat. It's funny how these two things connect. By the way, we completely skipped over the fact that Guillermo del Toro, it's Frankenstein we're talking about. That movie comes out next year at some point. There's really limited details. I know that the story is a little bit of a different take. I love Guillermo del Toro. I'm excited to see his take on Frankenstein. Nosferatu comes out on Christmas. The fact that we're getting a Nosferatu Frankenstein about 6-7 months between each other is crazy to me. I'm also a big Eggers fan. So if you like Robert Eggers, you like Guillermo del Toro, we're about to eat. Okay, this is about to be a good time. Moving on. If you remember John Watts, remember that guy that did the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies? Yeah, that guy. He, if you remember correctly, released a movie earlier this year called The Wolves. That starred, if I remember correctly, it's Brad Pitt and George Clooney. That was supposed to get a sequel, randomly got canceled on Apple TV. For those who are wondering, that was a John Watts call. The reason for that? Because Apple, at the last minute in the 11th hour, did not release it to theaters like they had promised. They stuck it to streaming, and John Watts called it quits. He said, I'm done. I'm not making a sequel.
Yeah, I mean, putting your foot down on that. I haven't seen Wolves. I'm looking at a rating here. It's 6.5 out of 10. It probably would have just fallen under a sequel of an action film. No big deal. But I applaud him for having the cojones to put his foot down. It does suck for fans of Wolves, but sometimes it has to be done. Now, will it phase Apple? No, not at all. Unless they had a lot of money in it to begin with, but still, I don't think it's going to phase Apple any.
No, and
So
Apple,
who's it really hurting?
Apple's done well. They've hopped into the streaming, the streaming sphere. They've done really well. They have a lot of successful series. They've kind of established themselves as a place where people will go and people will pay the fee every month. However, I would not say they're on the level of a Netflix. They're not on the level of an Amazon yet, or an HBO even, of Max.
Yeah.
So to have a successful debut of one of an original film, not just any film. It's an original film by John Watts, who's a very successful director with two very successful, very established actors. You get those two in any movie, in Brad Pitt and George Clooney, you're gonna get views. To have that guy and those two walk out on you when you are behind the competitors, that's a bad look. So
Yeah.
again, you're right. I don't think they will suffer because their business necessarily isn't based upon the success of their films. However, for a company that does kind of want to grow and continue to establish themselves in that sphere and in that space, it's a bad look to get that guy and those two leave because of your bad decision. And I do think that, and it's unfortunate for Apple because I think you're right. He had the cojones and he put his foot down because of kind of what's happening around them, as in like Netflix and their whole release thing with Daniel Craig and Roadhouse with Amazon. I think Apple just kind of happened to be, they kind of were the camel, but blank, sorry.
Yeah, one
The
of
straw that
those
broke the
sayings
camel's
that
back.
people say.
Yeah, yeah.
The camel and
The
you can't
camel
lead a
and
camel to
they
water
were,
or something.
Hold on, give me a second. They were the straw that broke
Yeah.
the camel's back. They necessarily, I don't think they should have probably gotten in the crossfire, but they did. They made a bad choice. They were following industry trends and they lost.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, it's a gamble. It always is. We're gonna get a fast one on this guy by telling him it's going to be theatrical and then take it away from him. And backfired
I don't mean to go
royally.
back. I don't mean to go back to Roadhouse, but that's like the number one examples because I think at the time of its production, MGM, who was originally producing the Roadhouse remake, was bought by Amazon. And so now when that got transitioned from MGM to Amazon, that's when they were told, because Lyman asked, hey, is this still going to be in theaters? And he was told yes. And then at like I said, the 11th hour, they kind of pulled it on him. So I think that this is just following industry trends. Apple was kind of saying, hey, this will save us a lot of money and probably make us a lot of money. And John Watts, as you said, good on him. If you want to make a change to the industry, you got to do what you got to do. And for Apple, it's a bad look. Moving on, Sonic 3, it had its second and full trailer release showing more of Jim Carrey and the Sonic and Friends. Jake, did you get a chance to watch it?
I did not get a chance to watch the trailer, but to have Jim Carrey back for a third one, it better have been a golden script. If anybody knows that reference, Jim Carrey was not going to come back unless Sonic 3 was a golden script, and lo and behold, here he is.
Thing is, they pulled Jim Carrey out of retirement. Keanu Reeves is Shadow. Idris Elba said he would put everything he had into Knuckles. I don't know what Sonic has in the water. I know it's very popular. It's going to make a ton of money. The Sonic fandom is unlike any other. They're up there with
Right.
the Nintendo and the Mario and all that stuff. Sonic's there. I don't know what they have in the water, but whatever it is, it's working.
Yeah, at least for the cast, we'll see. We'll see how good this movie does. But it looks great on the trailer that I have seen. So we'll see. We'll see. I can't wait for Keanu's performance.
Oh, same. So last two tidbits here of news before we get into what we're watching. The Minecraft official trailer was released last week. Whatever. Moving on. James Gunn's The Superman trailer is finished and is awaiting release and is reportedly going to have a mid-December premiere. A lot of people
Man.
excited about the trailer. I think that says a lot about what the movie's reception will be when it comes out next year.
I really hope it's not another superhero thing. I said this at the beginning. Marvel, Justice League, DC, it's all rough. Right now it just seems like the same thing. So this new take on Superman might be refreshing, but I don't have a lot of faith in it. But we'll see. I can't wait to watch it.
Last bit before you go. Jake, what you watching this week?
I'm actually probably gonna watch Baby Driver for probably the double digits time. I've been listening to the soundtrack like on my way to work, and it's one of my favorites. I don't know what it is, the storytelling, even just through the music itself. I've been itching to watch it, and I just haven't found the time to sit down and do it, and I'm gonna do it.
Amazing. So I'm
you
going to be watching Red One. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to be
That's crazy, dude.
I'm interested by the top two in the box office this week. I almost want to see Wicked because like Gladiator 2 is more, I guess, my style, but like I love all kinds of movies, so it's like it's tough to it's tough to just say, well, I'm going to watch this versus that. I really do. I'm interested to see Wicked. I've not seen the musical, so I am excited to kind of get a new perspective on this story. So I've grown up with The Wizard of Oz. Fun little tidbit about me, if you didn't know. My family is actually related to Judy Garland, who played Dorothy in the original. So my family's had a really weird connection to, and it's very distant. So I'm not gonna like act like, yeah, I'm cinema royalty, because I'm very far removed. However, because of that,
Don't listen to him. He wears those red shoes when he's alone.
Jake, you're not supposed to say that, Jake.
They passed him down to him.
Anyway, my family, because of this really distant, probably at this point not even related type of little tidbit fun fact about my last name and my family, we've watched The Wizard of Oz a lot. So I watched Oz, which was whatever the James Franco, or was it The Great and Powerful Oz or whatever it was called. I watched that when that came out years ago. So. I thought it was fine. I thought it was good. My family was really hyped for that. Again, the Broadway adaptation of Wicked, family's hype. So I'm probably going to watch that just for the family's sake. But there's a lot I'm excited about. But I will probably pin it down to Wicked.
All right.
And that's our show.
I appreciate you guys listening. Yeah, that's our show.
Thank you for sticking with us. I know we've had a few bumps in the road. This is our first official. We're just thankful to be here. Thankful for you, as we've said now 3 times. Thank you so much for just sticking with us this long. If you liked it, share it again. Wherever you listen, keep coming back. We'll be back next Monday with episode 2 of Beyond the Screen. Thank you, guys.